back to Two Worlds Collide podcast. On today's episode, we have John Dixon. John is a former Special Forces Sniper in Commando, where he deployed to East Timor, Iraq, and Afghanistan. He's recently worked privately in Africa, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, you ready to go?
Yeah.
Let's get after it. John Dixon, mate, welcome to Two Worlds Collide podcast. How you going?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate.
It's mate, I've known you for quite some time, and you didn't need much convincing to get on here. So it was.
That's gonna burn me with a few of the boys. That's a lie.
Yeah, but look, I want to jump into some of your military stuff because you're probably one of the most qualified and experienced snipers in the Special Forces in the Afghan era. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, you'd be close. Well, I mean, I guess I'd be in the team, the team that I was in, and the teams that we were in, were all like that. And some guys are like, they've gone off silently and done whatever, or they're still operating, which is incredible. So yeah, like while you know me, and you can say that, like there's obviously another team of dudes that I was with who probably over equal or definitely better, definitely some better guys out there. And then even now the guys have got those like lessons and are still operating or still in the unit or have gone on. Like there's phenomenal experience out there. But yeah, I appreciate you throwing me under the bus for that.
No worries.
Boys be like, did you tell him to say that?
No, that's one of the boys said, throw that at him and see his reaction. So.
Yeah, actually.
But no, look, I think that sort of just sets a scene of the stuff we're going to go over, and then also some of the private stuff that you've worked in, and some of the regions you've worked in Africa and Middle East and stuff like that as well. So you've got some really good thoughts on the geographical landscape of the political stuff happening around the world. And, I do want to dive into a little bit of Russia and Ukraine and what's happening in the Middle East and stuff like the presidential race. I think it's all relevant to, sort of that side that you've worked in for the past, 20 years, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
Has given you a lot of experience and then a lot of travel around the world to, gain a lot of knowledge, to have some good insights onto these topics. So you ready to dive into it?
Yeah, man.
All right. Well, I guess let's start back at the journey and we'll work our way from, the military all the way through to your career and sort of where we are now. But did you want to just start off by, telling me, your thoughts on joining the military and then, why you joined the military and then specifically, why did you want to go to the 2 Commando unit?
Yeah, I guess it was sort of, I don't know, sort of ingrained in me from when I was really young. Like I grew up in Townsville, so we had like all the military experience and things like that. Like we had both units always 1 and 2 RR always on show, and then so we always used to go out to those open days and get that experience. And then I had a military history in my family, mostly through like a lot of Australians during World War I, II, and things like that. Yeah, from there, like I'd always had been fixated on the military since I was probably about 4 or 5 years old from memory, and was always heading in that direction. And then East Timor kicked off. I was in grade 11, sort of watching all that sort of go past, and I thought, I'm not going to miss out. And I was just treading water at school anyways until I got out. So I'd been in school at the end of year 11 and, got in. So went to the defence and then...
Up in Townsville?
Yeah, went back to 1 RR. Then, from flash to bang, from when I started, it was, I think I joined, it would have been 8 months from when I joined to when I was boots on the ground in East Timor.
Yeah, nice.
For my first trip there. And then,
What sort of work did you do over there?
It was all the peacekeeping stuff. Did have a few little kinetic things, not for me. But in and around where we were, only very minor type things, and it's just keeping the peace and a few little things there. But for me, it just set a good foundation of like all your hard sort of skills, patrolling, things like that. It was better being there for 6 months than like 2 years back at home. Like in terms of you're patrolling with live rounds, a potential enemy threat. As minimal as it was, it still kept you clued on. So, yeah, it was a much better experience.
Yeah, it's probably good to get that experience earlier on in your career.
Yeah, most definitely. It did set the tone, and as a average 18-year-old, I was pretty average soldier back then, and so like to get that stamped into you early, then you can only go up from there.
Yep. All right, and then obviously going from there, what was the motivation to go to the 2 Commando? Or it was 4AR back then, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it was still 4AR, I guess.
But they were still a branch of the Special Forces.
Yeah. So it was growing. So that was the appeal at the time, like special operations, whether it be Perth or Sydney, being SASR or 2 Commando. I wanted to go to one or the other. Initially, sights were set on SASR, but then as 2 Commando was growing, we started to see a little bit more stuff about them in Tag East, in defense magazines. Start to see them rolling around, doing jobs and hits, and then hearing more about their operations in Afghanistan. It sort of started to turn my head a bit. And then the East Coast, staying on the East Coast certainly probably was the clincher for that, for trying to balance a family life if I could.
Yeah, they're pretty segregated over in Perth, aren't they? Just in regards to cities.
Yeah.
You got a 6-hour travel back to Sydney. The closest is Adelaide.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. They can stay there, though.
Yeah. So when did you do your selection course to get into 2 Commando?
It would have been mid-06.
Yeah. And what was that like? So walk me through that, the sort of, for someone that doesn't, because I don't really have too many people that are right into the military that follow this podcast. So you might have to give them a bit of a walkthrough of what that's like.
It's just horrible, to be honest. But, well, I was there with your cousin, so he would have told you enough of the stories. But, for selection, it's just about 3 weeks of, I guess it's a lot of individual and teamwork stuff, but it's just non-stop punishment. So there's a physical aspect to it, which is the actual physical testing, some types of tests that you have to pass. And then it just goes on to what you can endure, and then what you can and how you can perform under that extreme stress. You sort of just float to the top or you sink and then you're gone. And so they can pull you at any time during that. And then there's, prolonged periods of no food, no sleep, things that we just weren't prepared for.
Realistically, they're just trying to break it down until you either quit or you just make it through.
Yeah, so I think...
Are they trying to sort of break it down so they can turn you into what they want you to be?
No, maybe. I think what they're trying to do is you can't hide your personality traits when you're tired and hungry and things like that. So, one, they get to see what you really are like. So if you are going to be like a bit of a prick and be lazy, like that's going to start showing a lot earlier for some guys than others that are just going to put the team first no matter what the whole way through. So it's more probably seeing your personality traits, what you really like, and how you can mentally function under so much pressure and without food and sleep.
Because obviously this is a flow-on effect when you go over to Afghan, right? Because you're in these situations when you're in Afghan, so they need to test you pre-Afghan or pre-war to see what you're going to react like when life's on the line.
Oh, 100%. And, and then even the Rio cycle after that, like selection's it's 3 weeks. Most people should be able to get through it if they're dedicated enough. And obviously that doesn't happen. There's a pretty big failure rate on selection. But also to be able to keep going and show that you're going to be trainable and not make mistakes when you're tired and hungry later on all the other courses where things actually, if you do drop the ball, like it could mean someone else's life. Like if you're in live fire and you're tired, didn't have a good night's sleep, like it's pretty, someone's going to pay for it, and it could be you or it could be someone else. Yeah. So they need to make sure that you can just function over a wide variation of tasks under any type of sleep depth and things like that.
Talking about sleep depth, what's the longest period you do go without sleep on a selection course?
Sort of varies depending on a whole heap of things, and no doubt it's changed, but it's about a 3 to 5 day period, and it goes off like a whole heap of things. You'd say comfortably 4 days is the average of, and like when they say this is I didn't realize this when I got there. I didn't even know what this like part of the selection was called demarcation. Everyone's going, oh no, demarcation's coming up. I don't know how I missed the brief on it. I didn't know what it was. And I'm like, they're like, nah, you go with no food or no sleep for like 4 days. I'm like, that doesn't sound right. Like they'll have to feed us something or sleep. Anyway, like day 2 or 3, I was just like hallucinating, going, holy shit, they're like legit not going to feed us and give us any sleep. So, you know, and it ebbs and flows depending on how people are going and how much work they've done. Like the selection can be a little bit flexible. Like, you know, could be conditions as well, but largely it stays the same. And selections still got like a lot of tricks up its sleeve too. Like there's just things that either I won't remember or we don't talk about, but like, you can be as prepared as you want for everything, but then you'll get there and you've heard all the stories, all your mates give you the intel like on what goes on. Then you'll get there and you're like, mate, this is next level extreme. No one's told me that we're doing this. This is wild. Like I think my first punishment PT session on selection, 2 people broke their legs.
Yeah.
And one was an instructor. I was like, this is a bit hectic. Like I was like, could wind it back a bit. Like,
but you know, I guess everything's for a reason though, right?
Yeah. No, it definitely paid off in Afghan. Certainly, you know, probably the longest periods of time were without sleep on selection and some of the lead up training at Afghan. But I was soon to find out once we got there. On one particular mission that we ended up doing that, like it was like 3 or 4 days without sleep. And it wasn't because that's what we wanted. It's just how the battle space developed. So like we were in run and fights one night. And then the next night, you know, we'd been ambushed or a vehicle had broken down. We need to get extracted before daylight out of the green belt. So all of a sudden you are on 3 days, no sleep, and you're still required to fight. Like I remember we got into a fight for this particular one, I'm thinking just before we headed back to base. And, you know, we've been hallucinating and, you know, people falling asleep at the wheel, but all of a sudden you're fighting again and you've got to like PID targets. You've got like, you can't drop the ball on any of that. Like you need to know where everyone is and stuff like that. So yeah.
So what happens to the body, you know, when you're into that 3 days no sleep? Does adrenaline hit through and take over, and then your training just sort of you revert back to your training? Because obviously you're tired. Everything in the body is telling it to go to sleep and rest.
Yeah.
But there's a threat there, and if you do rest, you could die. So is the body or is the mind taking over and saying, no, we need to do this now? Is there adrenaline pumping through? Is that what's happening?
It sort of ebbs and flows. Hey, like you'll go through cycles, and that's why like we're so reliant on our teams as well. Like, you know, if someone's not picking up their game, but like they're just in a down cycle, like you've got a whole team to pick everyone up and make sure everyone's safe and works like that unit cohesion. Because you just can't be on all the time. Like people say, oh, you have to be like, I'm sorry, but like, you know, a 2-hour picket after like 3 days no sleep, you can be the toughest person on earth. There's no way you're not taking hits and your eyes aren't going down and your face isn't smashing into the gun. Like
happens to the best of them.
No, there's just no way. And you know, people that haven't done it will probably say it can be done. Like, but that's what I reckon. But so adrenaline is taking over. And I guess to answer your question, like special forces is just one of the biggest differences to some other forces, just the time that we've got to work on our sort of hard skills. So, you know, stoppages, anything that's going wrong with our weapons, things like that, we're not applying any cognitive power to. Like it's just something that we've done so many times routinely under so many different conditions that all those hard skills are really cemented. And so you can actually, when the adrenaline spikes, there's a threat, you can apply some type of cognitive load to that problem while your hard skills are just getting run in the background, sort of like a computer type thing.
Yeah, it almost becomes like a robotic response.
Very much so, yeah. And I've seen guys do stoppages on the move with enemy just in front of them, and they're just doing it nice and clean, keeping their eyes on them, like watching injured dudes and stuff like that. And it's just the pattern's unbreakable almost. So
the training works.
The training most definitely does work. So yeah, and that's a whole thing. Like in special forces, you're nothing really more than a tactical problem solver, and it can be across a bandwidth of small problems to massive problems. But as long as all your hard skills are like put to the side, you apply no cognitive load to it, and so things become easier. Yeah, adrenaline spikes that gets you up cognitive functions, you can apply it to something because you're not worried about all those hard skills or not worried about your team members. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing and things like that.
So how many times did you deploy to Afghan? And sorry, so you've done 1 to Timor?
2 to Timor.
2 to Timor.
One with 1 OR, one with 6 OR, and then I went 4 to Afghan and once to Iraq with 2 Commando.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. And 2 Commando was at the spear tip of that type of fighting overseas. Do you have any really good memories from some of the better jobs you did over there? You know, in regards to having to rise above or being in a really sticky situation where you could let the audience know that it was just one of those times where it was a bit like hell, but we managed to work our way through it.
Yeah, there's probably a few of those. But it's funny because there are a few of those, and then there are a lot that just went according to plan, which you don't really hear about, which are probably bigger operations and more dangerous, but everything went our way. Like we'd planned them so well.
How often does that happen?
That's like 90% of the time.
Yeah, they do go right.
Yeah, they do go right. Like, there's little things that always happen off to the sides that you're not really, that you weren't expecting. Well, you are expecting it. You're just hoping it doesn't happen, right? And then, there is 5 guys going to try and rush our position, and you're like, oh, we're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, the plan goes how it's supposed to go. I guess where it doesn't is, for me, like sometimes helicopter crashes or vehicles that go down and things like that, where you're sort of relying on a smooth in and out, and now you're not getting that. And so the enemy's going to take advantage of that. And so, I think that's where the problems sort of lie a little bit.
Just talking about those moments and dealing with loss, how much does it, like, especially when 90% of the jobs go right, but 10% of the jobs, they might get hit by an IED or a chopper might go down. What's the first initial reaction when something bad does happen? Is it to secure the scene and then get guys in there to extract the injured, or is that pretty much how it works?
Yeah, it sort of depends. With a helicopter, usually you've got your orders, which will say if a helo goes down, that's now the main effort.
Yeah.
My sniper team, I wasn't with them at the time. We had one go down pretty hard, and they quickly got on the radio and said, we can secure this site. They were fortunate enough to be in the site that they could secure, because it was both SASR and 2 Commando on the ground, and they were all starting to move towards a helicopter and bin their primary objectives. And the snipers were quick enough to get on and just say, hey, no, we've got it, like, you guys go. It sort of differs depending on the situation. Wounded, sometimes it's to secure them if it's a advantageous position, but it's almost like Dr. ABC, right? So danger is your first one. There's no point in going to this wounded guy if there's, still 30 Taliban running around outside. Like, you might go to him, and as American soldier saying, like, think it's dead bodies attract dead bodies.
Yeah.
So something along those lines, and it's true. Like, if you're rushing to just save one guy, like, his team's probably going to be doing that anyway, right? And they've got the people for it. But it's very much your focus. But at the same time, if they're like, nah, we've got it, like, and take care of everything else, and so we'll keep going to the primary objective. And that sort of happened with, one of my first closer contacts in a built-up area was with when Luke Worsley passed and was killed. And, that night we probably didn't know, the team I was with, how bad it was in the building next to us. Had we known, like, we probably would have pushed in there. However, at the time, it sort of seemed like it was under control over communications. And to a degree it was, but we moved to our primary areas, so we didn't go straight to them. There was still a lot of Taliban cruising around, so we sort of had to deal with them, and they were jumping off walls and roofs behind us. So even if we wanted to, we may have made a mistake and end up getting ourselves surrounded, which is probably wouldn't have been great for us. So.
Yeah, that's probably, especially when you're in the shit like that, to get even more people, into that sticky situation where people could die. It probably just doesn't affect or it doesn't help the overall mission status.
No, and people will go, like, they might say, oh, why didn't you come, or you should have come, or and you can look back in hindsight and, like, maybe you should, but, instead of one dead body, you could have had three.
Yeah.
Like, or you don't know how it's going to play out. There's no way you can predict exactly how it's going to play out. Like, you may have stopped, like, another attack or another, fight, like them trying to make a fight back and stuff like that. So, it's a real hard one to pick, and it's
while we're on this, I did want to ask you a question about dealing with loss and dealing with the death of soldiers. And it's one of those things that would be incredibly hard after the death of a soldier or a friend or someone that you've worked with to go out again, the following days or the following weeks and continue to do the same job that you were doing where you just previously lost that guy or previously lost a team member. So, what's it like mentally to get yourself back up again and then to go out knowing the full risk of the job?
Yeah, pretty tough, eh? Like, particularly in the early days, it was tough. Like, and I'd say probably for the guys in the teams that lost their member, mate, it would be, I couldn't imagine it. Like, I had guys around me that I knew, like, killed, but no one really close, like super close, for me to be on the ground with. I did lose super close mates, but they sort of died in different times and things like that. But yeah, it is difficult and it weighs on your mind. So there's a whole heap of different things that add up to how difficult that is. Like, if they've got kids, did you attend the funeral? Like, things like that make it more difficult when you see the family side of it. So Command was really good, or 2 Commando. I was just speak to 2 Commando, but often they would keep you in the field after a death rather than bring you home straight back in. They'd like to keep you out a night or two and just keep you on the horse. So get back on the horse, you're going to make another contact, you're going to do this, you're going to keep on with your mission and things like that.
I've read an interesting study about it, how they prefer to get soldiers back out again, because if they don't get them out again within that, 24, 48 or 72 hour period, they can dwell on their mind.
Oh, most definitely.
And then they don't want to go out again. So ensuring that they get moving and get back out again and getting, doing jobs again is critical for a soldier's mental ability to be able to continue to do the same job they've been doing.
Yeah, most definitely. And even factors into, like, sort of our wounded guys, like, that were pretty badly wounded. Initially, from my recollection, we used to baby them a little bit when they got home to Australia. Not baby them, but, like, you can do whatever you want type thing, fit in wherever you want here and there. And be reluctant to send them overseas even when they wanted to go. They'd be like, oh, what about your injury? And that mindset changed over the years, where they just went, we need to get them back over there. If they want to go, let's get them back over there ASAP and get them back on that horse, because, the last time they had their femur shattered or something by a round going through. Now, you don't want to let that build up for too long, that fear.
I guess it can create an environment of them second guessing themselves.
Most definitely. And if they have too much time to reflect, like you said, like, they can overanalyze it, and then you just get that analysis paralysis where you just don't know what's up, what's down, sort of thing.
And then they might not react quick enough to a situation, and the worst might happen.
Yeah, that's right. So, and it was good our unit could see that too. Because, particularly when Luke, I was a young Special Forces soldier, and thought I saw when they kept us out in the field, I was like, oh, that's, it's pretty rude. Why are they keeping us out here? Like, we just lost our first guy and stuff like that. And then we went in on a couple other jobs the night after, or maybe 2 nights after, and then they brought us back in. And we've got a mission to do too. So, like, getting your head back in the game, like, it's not just about people. Like, certainly you want to keep them protected and stuff like that, but, like, you do have a mission to do. You just can't bail on everything just because of one person. And it sounds a bit harsh for people that knew them, but, like, that is the fact of it. And I guess dealing with that loss, you do have to pick yourself up fast, or it does. Yeah, certainly I've seen it creep in with myself and other friends, like, where, you see something hectic and, like, to get back up on your feet, if you don't do it quickly, it can be real tough. And I think even looking at some of the guys that maybe only did 1 or 2 trips and lost friends or whatever and things like that, and sort of got out, not maybe because of it, but or moved on, You know, certainly they seem to struggle with a few things more than maybe guys that just kept going. Where and that's just something that I've observed. Whereas guys sort of, you don't want to sound harsh, but you kind of got used to it in the end to a degree. Like you just become a little bit fatalistic about it. Like, well, we're in Afghanistan fighting a war. Like, this is bound to happen. Like, but in our earlier days, like for some reason I don't know why we didn't think that was a possibility. Like, I think we got away with it for so long, like just with injuries here and there, that you just not get a God complex, but you do start to just feel as though it's almost, like training. No one dies in training. No one really dies. Like, and then you've been getting away with it, and then something happens. You're like,
Then reality hits.
Yeah. And then by the end of it, you're like, well, and you're looking at the new dudes, right? Like they might be a bit more upset, not more upset, but like openly upset about something that might have happened. And, you're just sort of looking at them like, what are you carrying on about? Like,
I guess.
But you were like that at the start, right?
Yeah,
like,
I guess experiences customise you to deal with those situations.
Yeah, most definitely.
And I guess that's what it is from the new guys to the experienced guys and guys that have done it. Before they've been there, they've experienced it, and in some really harsh way, it's just for the guys that have experience, it's a part of the job.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, it sort of just gets. Yeah, it's at the back of your head, and you hope it doesn't happen, but then it does happen. You're like, well, we're in a pretty hairy situation. It was probably likely. We're lucky that that's all that happened. Yeah,
it's a very harsh fact of war and battle, and especially in the Afghan era, where it was a bit different in World War II and Vietnam, where blokes were going in and they would lose 5 or 6 at a time, and like there was thousands coming home, but. I guess dealing with that first loss and then being accustomed to it over the time. I'm just speaking for you here, so obviously pull me up in anything, but you would definitely deal with it, or you would definitely get build up a tolerance to that type of stuff, and mentally, I guess you would build up a barrier to that.
Yeah, most definitely, and sort of just block it away, and psychology person probably tell me that's a really unhealthy way to deal with things, but like most of the guys would do that, and you just have to put it in a box and put it to the back of your mind. Like, you've still got a job to do, so if you don't want to do the job, well, fine, you can open up that Pandora's box and go home, get on the piss and drink your life away or something like that, but like keeping job focused, and you just have to put it to the back, or you just drive yourself crazy.
So what about that coming home and reintegrating into society? Did you ever find it? Do you ever struggle to get back home, and especially after doing some of the probably maybe not that first trip, but the second, third, and fourth? How you done so much time overseas to then come back in Australia, and do you ever struggle with that?
Probably in my earlier days, I probably struggled with my Timor trip the most, because I was sort of young and naive. And, you see a bit of human suffering and things like that. And you sort of struggle then. You come back a little bit odd, is probably the only way to put it. And you've been around people that are all the same as you to a degree. And then, reintegrating is a bit weird. And, it can be emotionally challenging up and down, especially when you're younger, because you are hormonal and emotional changes, like you turn on a dime type thing. And I guess from the trauma part of it in Afghan, but we were still sort of young, so you sort of once again did unhealthy probably coping mechanisms, like just party hard and play hard to bury it deep down. So there's a lot of that, and that's obviously unhealthy. Don't deal with your problems like that, but that's how we did it.
Well, that was all, even when I came back from Afghan in 2012, it was what everyone did. Everyone, we all just drank. And,
100%.
We all just drank and partied, and no one ever really spoke about anything again.
Yeah, that's right. The funny thing is you never. When you were drinking, that's probably the only time you would speak about it. And then the next day, it's just radio silence, right? Like no one, it's deleted. Like no one ever would remember it.
Yeah, I'll just delete nights out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's
that never happened.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that. So, but then as it got older, I found it less hard to come home. Like you're sort of a little bit more
accustomed
to it and wanting to be home. enjoy your downtime. Like you, obviously, you know, when you get overseas, you might maybe get new guys or new officers that want to get into like massive war and contacts, and you know they're itching to get into it, and you're just like just like chill, have your downtime because it's coming regardless of whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
Like we're going to get into it. Like this is the unit that this is what we do. Like we are going to get stuck into it. Like they might have a couple of quiet jobs and be down in the dumps. You're like, mate, enjoy this quiet job because it's about to happen. And like while we all loved our big jobs and stuff like that and kicking off, like sometimes it was just good. Like everything, like I said, goes to plan. Shots didn't get fired. Maybe you caught the bad dudes napping like in their sleep, like literally in the middle of the night, and everything went your way. And so it's kind of like that coming home. Like you're like, oh, I just want to get home. I'm going to relax because I know the fun stuff's coming. I know the fun training's coming. I know the fun work's coming. I know all the excitement's coming. So it's sort of, you just had that mentality shift, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. You know, the younger you are, then the more naive you are, and the more stuff I think can trigger you.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah,
just and I wouldn't even say they're bad issues, but like surface level issues, like you know, you're in a plane and everyone's taking too long to get off.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
or
right.
like
100%.
you know what I mean? So like no one's got a sense of urgency and stuff like that.
Yep.
Those things get exposed more, I think, when you're younger and you've just come back from a trip, than what it would be if you would be older and more wise and you'd have more knowledge about it. And you'd be like, well, this is just how society works.
That's right. Yeah, they're just normal people going about their normal day.
Don't get angry at them for just being a normal person.
Yep.
But when you're younger and you do a trip, and I found this out when I did mine at 20, went to Afghan, and then you come back, and because you've just been around like-minded people for 6 months, you've all got a sense of urgency. You're all on the same page. You're all there to do the same job, and you're all pretty fit. You're all pretty motivated. You get back to Australia, and people were moving slow and people were lazy, and it's just their normal life and living their normal life, and you're getting angry at them for it.
Yeah, well, they've got no reason to be like in a rush, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're just like mission focused. I want to be down the shops and back now, like just so. And like, it is funny because like, that's probably the biggest thing was to sort of detrain yourself, I guess, like to like, oh, everyone's going at their own speed, doing their own thing, like whereas like you're like a little bit hectic. And I think I read a study not long ago, like on it was just something about a psychologist had written about defense personnel. I don't know whether it was our army or not, but it had it was about our high consequence decision making. So like everything had like a big consequence at the end of it. So even from, remember, you go to Kapuka and they're like, oh, your pouch is undone, 600 light horsemen are dead, or like your whole section's killed. So like our mentality in the military is if we don't do something, even as small as that, someone's dead, or there's a high consequence to the back end of that, which most of the time there is to a degree, but then it's sort of ingrained in us. So we come home and me not getting that car spot for that other guy is now like in the back of my mind, like it's a big deal, but it's not a big deal. It's like, it's just something small, or the kids whinging about something or not picking something up, like telling your kids to do something. Yeah. Like you go high level because in the back of your mind, you've only ever dealt with high consequences.
Yeah,
like it's
that's
not
interesting.
like, it was a really interesting. I'll try and dig it up for you afterwards because and in your mind, something bad's going to happen, because you've always been punished for like small infringements, like a button being open on your shirt or something. Like,
I mean, like now that you're saying it, there's all this stuff in my life that it does do that. Like, 100%. So if someone steals a park for me, or if I'm not down the shops quick enough, or my wife is walking around and she's looking at the same box of oats to get, and they say the exact same thing on it. She puts one down and then picks the other up and looks at it and puts it back down and picks another one up. And I'm like, it's the same box. But to me, it's like you go in there and you grab it, you put it in, and it's on to the next item. And everything has got a small little consequence to it, because if we don't get that, then our next item is going to take longer, and we're going to be here for longer. And then we get home longer, then I lose more hours in the day. And every small thing has a large consequence to it, because that's the way that we've been made
most
to
definitely,
think,
and like
made to operate.
Yeah, like you have like your zipper undone or your pockets undone. Like you'd be doing, like in some scenarios, you're doing push-ups or going for a run. Like your whole team, like everything had a big consequence attached to a small thing. And like while that's important in the military, it's not as important on the life outside. And that was a big adaptation for me, particularly once I got out and started working with other government organisations and things like that. You're just like, you lazy mother, and like you're trying to like go high level, and they're like, relax, mate. Like,
This isn't
the army. Like, we're not special operations. Yeah, okay.
That's really interesting. I would love to grab that study off you.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely dig it up. It was really good.
Now, talking about sort of life after the military, what did you do, when you decided to leave to Commando or the military, sorry?
Yeah, so the war time was slowing down to a degree.
Was that the reason? You'd sort of like, Afghan was winding up, there were no more trips. It was I sort of explain it to people like you're training to play in a footy side all year, but you're only sitting on the bench and watching if you're not going overseas.
Yeah, and that's one way, like it most definitely does feel like that. Iraq was on for 2 Commando and it wasn't as kinetic initially. Some other trips did different things over there. So it was a little bit slower pace, or not what I was dealing with. So it gave you time to think about what you wanted for the rest of your life. So it's either, I think it was giving me time to think. Like during the other decade in 2 Commando, I just didn't have time to think. Like it was, we are going every second year. Like we are, next year I'm going.
So
I get back.
Every 18 months.
Yeah. So I was on, and you put your team over everyone. Like you put your team first, and then you put your maybe unit first. You put that over your family, and then like I'd become a dad, so that was sort of a major part of me leaving as well. Like I just those times away, being away for long periods of time away from your kids was, definitely puts a big hole on your what you think your life will be like and how you'll be like.
Yeah.
It just makes you a bit softer to a degree. Well, made me a bit softer. It doesn't do that to everyone. I just had time to reevaluate my priorities, I guess. And so I moved on and went into into another government agency with firearms and sort of defensive tactics type training for about 18 months. Which was good because a lot of them were ex-defense personnel that worked in the cell that I was in.
Like-minded people.
Yeah, so it was an easy transition to a degree. Easier than some. Like, I think the wheels still fall off the cart a little bit. I went from 17, joined 17, was in the army for 17 years. So I knew nothing else.
Yeah.
It was like, you do get rattled, like to say that you don't, if you don't, like, good on you, like, lucky you. I was pretty rattled, and then I started working in a private sort of area.
Yeah. All right. So how much can you talk about with the private area in regards to sort of like locations you worked in and stuff like that?
Yeah, mostly pretty fine. Mostly pretty fine. Like, I guess in the private area, I worked for a training company, and a lot of the training we were conducting was on behalf of the US DoD, foreign military training, foreign military sales, and building partner capacity
weapon
programs.
supplies.
Yeah, so more equipment. Yeah, but weapons. A lot of it was weapons training. So we provide the training to the equipment delivered, and having a background
on behalf of the salespeople.
Yeah, on behalf of like the US DoD. So it's all sanctioned by them.
Is that about that? What's that movie?
People have already mentioned this to me. Dogs of War.
War
Dogs.
War Dogs, I think.
Yeah.
It's got used to be fat guy.
Yeah. No, it is very much
Seth someone. Anyway,
that is part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is. They were supplying those weapons part of those contracts.
So there's a supplier on one end, and then they will contract you to obviously meet them at a location and train them up on the weapons that they're selling to them.
Yeah, that they've delivered. So, and the US DoD runs the operation. So it's all their funded sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So no doubt I'll get some of these facts wrong, but
so what areas did you go and train people up in these weapon systems?
All through the Middle East. Yeah. All through the Middle East. I'm just trying to remember. Yeah, through the Middle East. A lot of time, sort of. Yeah, in the Middle East, Jordan and stuff like that. Southeast Asia, like the Philippines, Indonesia. A lot of time sort of going back to like their repeat sort of things. And then through Europe, prior to all this business going on now, like Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, even out to Trinidad and Tobago, like off where are they? Somewhere Caribbean. Yeah. So it's all over the shop. It's yeah. So and you just sort of apply for these training things, and you know, most of them you'll get, some you won't. Like there'll be, you know, there's ones going to Mongolia and like they're everywhere. Like they're all over the globe. And but it is interesting seeing who gets what, and how they're being trained in things, and then what other little agendas are at play as well. Like which easily Romania and some of those, probably shouldn't name them by have their names on there, but some of those countries surrounding that are sort of NATO backed and or want to be part of NATO, you can definitely see the influence that the US is trying to put there, like get all the Soviet era weapons out. Even if they're not part of NATO, right? Like they want them to appear NATO type troops
on their side.
Yeah, so radios, night vision,
aligned with them.
Yeah, aligned with them. All weapon systems look like they're not Soviet AKs and stuff like that anymore. Like it's all like getting all that influence out, washing that influence out to a degree. So
yeah, it's a very interesting space, especially Eastern Europe and what's happened in the last few years over there.
Most definitely.
You know, I follow it to a certain extent, just because I find it interesting.
Yep.
And I do get nervous that the Western world and you know, mostly the Democrat Party are sort of trying to drag us into some type of conflict with Russia that would, you know, if it did kick off, would probably potentially have the ability to end the world in regards to nuclear weapons and that. Because what a lot of people don't realize as well is that, you know, Russia, what's his name? The French dude, Napoleon.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he went and invaded, 200 years ago or 150 years ago, you know, and they practically burned down Moscow to get him out.
Yeah, that's right.
And then after that, World War One kicked off and, you know, they were once again invaded and called upon to fight on the Eastern Front. And then, you know, World War Two, look, they weren't the saints of World War Two because they did go in and invade Poland and stuff like that. But when Hitler decided to then invade the Eastern Front, you know, Russia took the biggest hits out of everyone.
Yeah.
You know, I think they lost somewhere in the realm of a couple million soldiers and a lot of civilians. That number might even be 20 times more.
Yeah, it was crazy amounts.
The civilians. So,
yep.
And now President Putin has come out and said, well, if anyone does ever invade again, we'll just nuke the world.
Yep.
Which is, I actually don't, and, you know, I might get ahead of saying this, but I actually don't mind that tactic given where they've come from.
Well, it's pretty much only option, right?
Yeah, because, like, you know, if someone had come into my home and my house for the last 200 years and slaughtered generations,
yep.
Yes, we haven't done the right things, but I would probably have the same type of attitude again with the global world. So I just think that whole Ukraine business and especially what's happening now, how it sort of was kicked off by the US in regards to Biden sent Kamala Harris over there to one of the NATO meetings. She mentioned it then for Ukraine to join NATO, and then 6 weeks later, Russia was having a special mission, practically invading Ukraine now. Hey guys, here's a clip of what we're talking about.
And admire President Zelensky's desire to join NATO. And one of, again, the founding principles of NATO is that each country must have the ability, unimpaired, unimpeded, to determine their own future, both in terms of their form of government and, in this case, whether they desire to be a member of NATO. And I'll put that in context because the obvious is also the point, which is that, and therefore no other country can tell anyone whether they should or should not join NATO. That should be their independent choice. That is the point of sovereignty. So I respect President Zelensky's desire to be a member of NATO.
Say what you want about it, but it doesn't really align well for the Western world when those type of things happen. And then in response, Russia does invade. And now I think the deal was years ago when the USSR started collapsing, it was okay that NATO can't come any further east than this boundary. And they've went so far over that now that they are practically borderlining Russia, right? There's only a couple of, or there's only one row of countries in between them. Now, if they were to get Ukraine on board, that means they're bordering with them. And that's like sort of crossed the line, I think, in regard to that deal they had years ago. But the US keeps seeming to wanting to push further. So, look, I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts if you've got any on that situation, or if you want to correct me on any of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I guess, and it sort of goes to what I was saying before too, like when I spoke to you off camera, but about the misinformation and disinformation, like trying to make an assessment of this can be difficult at times, just because of how much propaganda, disinformation, misinformation is out there. There is no unbiased news channel. Like they just sort of don't exist.
Yeah, you're either watching Fox News or Sky News, or you're watching 7 News, CNN, or CNBC.
Yeah, it's like all of it's got their own agendas. Like, the information's in there, hopefully, but you are right. Like in terms of, and once again, it's hard to say, but like, Putin had sort of had these lines in the sand where he wanted to maintain that buffer, and he might have been going to do what he was going to do regardless because of some of those border regions in Ukraine. But you've given him the reason. Like, you've given him a reason to do it. Like, so there's two thoughts: is he was always going to do it, but you've given him the reason. Like, he's told you enough is enough. You keep putting pressure. You keep assisting these countries. You may not have put WMDs in the countries surrounding him, like he said, but you've certainly put things that are, from some of the information out there, that are of equal value or equal destructive nature. So, yeah, you've done everything but what he wanted. So, like, you've really pushed the line. So either he's pushing back or you've given him a reason to do what he wanted to do. So he's like, what incentive does he have to not do what he wants to do if you're just going to do what you want to do? Like the Western world just goes, he goes, I've told you a million times. Like, and, it is crazy. And I certainly think that he had certain buttons pushed that set him on this path. And now he's like, for a number of reasons, they're on like a path that they really can't back down from. Like they've dug in too deep.
Yeah, even I seen the other day, and again, this is, like you see stuff on the internet and you go, is that fabricated to what we wanted to see or what I wanted to see? But I don't know if it was Blinken or whoever, but it was US officials signing bombs in Ukraine.
Oh, good, perfect.
Saying, just signing it for what they're going to drop in Russia. And I'm thinking to myself, or not in Russia, on Russian troops in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, like, that's like we're so close to the point of something bad happening here that it could, drag a lot of the world into a very deep place. And I don't want to be no fear monger or anything like that, which makes people scared or something like that. But I just see it and it makes me nervous.
Oh, most definitely. Like, because if everything goes the way it should go, it's an isolated battle. Yeah, it sucks for the Ukrainians and it probably sucks for the Russians too. But like, if it stays isolated, but the problem is if a misstep happens or you push someone too hard, and
like if they drop bombs in Russia.
Yeah, like if they put our bombs into Russia now, just not within Ukraine. Even our support inside Ukraine was hugely like pushed back on by, President of Russia then was like, hey, if you put your own stuff in there, like there's going to be problems, right? And we did anyway. So, if you put them over the border now, you don't know how far that's going to go. Like if it has devastating effects on their military government, stuff like that, like once again, you may never have to set foot in Russia, like, and you could still bring on something that you don't want. Like, and it's probably more like that misstep, even if you look in the South China Sea with,
Taiwan and
planes dropping chaff on other planes and stuff like that. If that plane goes down, then what? Like, everything's going well at the moment. They're just intimidating each other, I guess, and people are pushing boundaries to see where everyone is. But if there's a misstep, if someone fires when they're not meant to fire, if something goes down and dies, like then what? Like, it's a big question. One plane, they're probably not going to go to war, but depends. Like, there's so much.
There could be a retaliation for that one plane.
Yeah, that's
which
right.
Which then has a flow-on effect.
Yeah, and like it's, it's like World War One, like the shot that traveled around the world or whatever they called it. Like
That 17-year-old kid that tried the assassination
Ferdinand.
attempt.
Yeah. So like such a small incident, and then that's just had like this massive, like millions or billions, whatever it was, died.
And then obviously World War II started because of World War One.
It was still repercussions from World War One. So like
that's why World War II started. So it was like we lost 60 million in World War II. I think they were saying like 23 million in World War One.
Yep.
So, close to 80 or over 80 million across the space of 50 years, 40, 30 years. That's like one generation. Like
just
one person could have been fighting in both wars if he's the right age. But just, one kid, one 16 or 17-year-old kid tried an assassination attempt in like one of those small Croatian or Romanian states somewhere down there, and it just had this reaction.
Yeah, that's right.
So
it's crazy.
I understand what you're saying now. Like, if it is only one plane, but what's that one plane going to be reaction of?
Yeah, and it's probably like the misstep that is probably the biggest fear. And people are saying that it can't happen. Well, it can. Like, and that's all it takes is just one misstep, or you push someone one too far. Like, if Zelensky get those rockets approved to go in to over into Russian soil, and if it's a limited strike, it might not have any repercussions at all, may not change anything, but you are squeezing the noose onto someone, and then if it has devastating effects, like, or he just gets jack of it, like it just goes, well, I'm done now, like I've gone too deep.
And the problem is we're playing in the era of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, crazy.
Like, before we weren't playing in that era. We were, World War II, we'd just seen the start of it. But, there was also the Cuba missile stuff as well, So that's obviously we went really, really close there. But I think we're at another really close point, and we've got to tread very carefully. And, moving on to another situation that is in the Middle East at the moment, this stuff with Hamas and Hezbollah and everyone versus Israel. Now, this is what I think. I think Israel is like is just a little post of democracy, a bunch of somewhat dictatorships, right? And I think it's important for Israel to be Israel, for the Western world to be able to function. Like, Israel does have nukes, and they are sitting there, and they do have that power as well. So they are very aligned with the US, and in a very small in a very small or big pocket of the world, they are a very small democracy.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
But I think, even that war being kicked off, it was like you see it sort of happen, and you see these guys fly in from, little things and shoot up a music festival, and then the repercussions of that. But on top of that, the propaganda campaigns that are getting run by each side, like you see stuff, and one day I'd be like, pour this side. The other day I'm like, pour this side.
Yeah.
Because their propaganda campaigns are so good.
That's right.
And a lot of people don't realise that in World War I and World War II, there were departments that were propaganda campaigns. Like they were,
100%.
They were for getting the people on side for what the government wants to do. And I think, there's a huge part of that now. They may not call them propaganda departments, but they're definitely there. Which is quite alarming as well, because this is like we're in an era of social media.
Yeah. Yep.
Where the algorithms can make you see one thing as well a lot of the time.
Oh, 100%. Like you add the algorithm on top of your own confirmation bias, and then you're just down a path or rabbit hole of just one way. Like, and it's just not that simple. Like, and you can be on either side of this coin in this conflict for whatever reason you've chosen it, but like, it's not that simplistic. Like if you are just hardline one way, like it's just not that. Like it can't be that. Like it's crazy. And you look at these insurgents, like these, like Hamas and some of these other sort of groups that are well funded, but they're not a stand up army. Like, so what other tool are they using, right? So people will go, oh, no, they wouldn't lie about their numbers of dead women and children. Okay, well, they're not a stand up army. have a look at their weapon systems and everything, their numbers that they got. What other tool do they have in their tool belt? And you're like, is it possible that propaganda is their biggest, best tool at the moment? And people will look you dead in the eye and go, no way. They wouldn't have fudged like a single digit.
They wouldn't lie.
Yeah, you're like, mate, are you serious? Like, not even just a little bit. And like, I read a UN report of a different UN group who, by the way, I just don't trust the UN whatsoever, but a UN group that apparently another one that's gone in and they've dropped some of these casualty rates by 50%.
Yeah.
Purely off just having first pass at the books. Like, that's totally untrue. Like, there's literally 10 people dead in the car park. There is not 200, and it was your own bomb that dropped short. Like, it's like, and they've dropped so much, and still, once again, I couldn't say that they are correct either. But like, because of the information coming out, what agendas and whatnot, but yeah, it's insane. But propaganda, especially for someone that doesn't have a stand-up army, like, it's their biggest tool, and the Western world's grabbed it and run with it.
Yeah,
like,
I think Hamas's propaganda campaign has been so much stronger than Israel because Israel have the weapon systems. Yeah, they would definitely still have a propaganda.
Oh, most definitely.
Department, but I think Hamas has pleaded that side, and I generally think as well that that's probably the outcome they wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely.
They wanted the world to get on their side.
Oh, most definitely. Like, it's been like this forever though, like with Hamas and their propaganda machine. And now they've just got something bigger to go with, right? Like, so, if like the hiding among civilians and stuff like that, it's a win-win situation for Hamas to a degree where, either they won't drop bombs and they're protected, or they drop bombs and kill civilians and it's a PR win, right?
Or they drop a bomb and it will say, they just dropped the bomb in a hospital, but realistically the HQ of Hamas were under that hospital.
Yeah, and like I spent some time over there as well, and a while back, and I won't get too far down into it, but a lot of the stuff, that equipment and things like that they were using is based off trying to minimise civilian casualties, which I find is ironic. Like, the equipment they were using was totally built because of their interactions in Gaza and stuff like that, the IDF. It was, these whole bits of equipment were made to reduce civilian casualties, and were being used. And like, their fighter jets do hard knock, whatever they are, bombs where they drop 2 concrete bombs on the building 30 minutes prior to dropping real bombs.
Yeah.
People still in there after that. Like, mate, if a concrete bomb slammed in this house now, mate, I'd be in that car so fast, we'd be gone. Like, and I just, and then to balance the scales too, like, Israel's got its propaganda campaign. They've got a lot to deal with. And so does, they've not done the right thing either over a big period of time. Like, and it doesn't excuse what Hamas did by any means. And Israel always had to respond to that. People go, oh, but what about the last 30 years? Unfortunately, you got to look at that one thing in isolation. It was horrible, the October 7th things, and they had to respond. Had they not, like, one, they've got this enemy that has just, like, a big hit and is just going to raise their morale and spirits. And then you've got all these other people, like you said, around them that dislike them, and they've got to show, Israel they think they need to show utter, military might, and if you do this, we'll do that. Because, like, if they let things go, it's going to encourage more people to do more things, because they may not let it go. More funding may go in. Oh, that was successful. Like Iran, whoever else is throwing their money in, goes, that was successful. Let's look how good that was. Let's give them more money. Imagine what they could do with. We gave them, $500,000. Imagine what we could do with, $2 million.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of that too. And you can do things for the right reason. And we're the perfect example of this. The Western world, with some of our forever wars in the Middle East, is you can do something for the right reasons and still fuck it up.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. Like, the execution can be poor, and it may not start like that, but you've done it for the right reasons. And but it's just not worked out the way.
Well, look at Afghanistan. We were there for 18 years, and we replaced the Taliban with the Taliban.
But better funded and armed Taliban.
Yeah, that's it. But now with everything that the US has, helicopters, tanks, all their weapon systems.
Perfect, really. Yeah, and giving them an alliance with China.
Yeah, that's right. It's just
But yeah, and like you talk about the money side of things as well, coming from Iran. Like it was so ironic that Biden administration released $6 billion to Iran. What, maybe a year ago now?
Yeah, right.
And
I think I
then
remember something like
yeah, and then all of a sudden Iran was funding these proxy wars,
Just the Yanks money.
Hezbollah, Hamas, and that group in Yemen.
that. Yep.
And they're
the Houthis,
and they're attacking the strait where the shipping containers go through. So they're pronouncing that on themselves. Hamas is kicking off. Hezbollah is firing rockets into Israel, and it's all funded by proxy wars through Iran.
Yep.
Which was money released by the American government. Now Trump came out and said, well, I don't know why you would ever release that. Obviously, that was a part of his campaign as well to blast them for doing that. So it helps them get in. But yeah, it just seems like a few mistakes have been made on the Western side. Look, I personally think if Trump was in power, I don't think any of this probably would have happened.
I totally agree with that. Like
he
has his faults but I think he probably could have kept a lid on both Russia and what's going on in the Middle East. I think just in terms of his, I guess his international diplomacy and that business minded, like he's very business minded. Like, is this good for us or is this good for them? Is this like it's not like an emotional thing, generally speaking, with him. It doesn't seem like that anyway. It's like, is this good for the world?
Yeah.
Is this good for us in that region? Is this good? And like can make a deal based off that and talk like sense based off his sort of business mind, in my opinion, from what I've observed. But yeah, I reckon he would have kept a lid on it as well.
Yeah. I just think I don't know. He seems to be against war and against that global security bullying type stuff that the US do, and he's more about enriching the US to make them almost financially stable to be that much of a power that no one can fuck with them.
Yeah, that's right.
Like like they used to be in the 70s and 80s. They were the financial power. Wall Street's there. They have enough money. Everyone's off the US dollar. So he's more about perking that up again rather than being that global security, which probably goes against what your FBI and CIA want and the American war machine wants.
Yeah.
Which is probably why I think he was probably hated so much in his last couple of years, because he was against that type of stuff when America has always been for that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And Jesus, like we're still how crazy to think that we're in a day and age now where people are taking shots at presidents as well. And
it's crazy.
Like I never
like multiple attempts with him. Like
I never thought we would be here.
Nah.
In this day and age where they can get that, but
well, that and on the precipice of another global conflict, like you sort of just got used to some of these limited wars and these other isolated sort of wars where you just think, but I think maybe enough people have died off now with experience, and we're just falling back in for that. History repeats itself, right?
Yeah.
Like, so we're doomed. No one remembers World War II. Like everyone sort of pretty much died off.
No one remembers the hardship times.
Yeah,
of it where
like
they don't want to
how
go back
bad
to
it was, and they're like, and I guess like we're just sticking on with Trump too. Like he's such a just unfortunately a divisive character, or now is made to be more divisive than what he is. Like it's certainly blown well out of proportion because of the divide in the states.
Yeah,
and like you were saying before, it's like we need the states to be stable. Like
We do.
need someone to be stable, like a big. Mighty power, democratic power to be stable.
Yeah, America
And
needs to
they're
be
fallen.
America.
Yeah, they need to get back to their roots because, like, it's funny. It's just not them, right? Like people go, well, why do we get involved in US politics? And on one hand, I agree. Why do we? But at the same time, on a global scale, we need them to be that stable community, that stable region, and that are rock solid, that are untouchable. And they are just not that at the moment. And everyone's reading the room, right? Like that's why everyone's just doing whatever they want. Like China's doing whatever they want. Like everyone's just going, oh, what are they going to do about it? Like they can't even get. They're trying to shoot their own president half the time.
Yeah,
Like
I mean, that first one was crazy, and then the flow-on effect from that. Like, I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast the other day where, they came out and said that instantly the shooter, that guy's body got cremated. They found his apartment spring cleaned. It had a deep clean on it. And then there was a couple other issues that I can't remember off the top of my head, but
I don't know, it just wasn't adding up. And
Joe
I'm just
Rogan
like,
ebbs and flows on
Yeah.
what's truth and what's not. Like,
yeah, obviously the more controversial stuff he says, the more listeners he gets, but it's all really interesting.
Well, I think they're clean, like, you know, when they talked about clean apartment, first they're saying they just couldn't find anything. And then, like, the clean apartment and stuff like that just got more and more clean. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, it was like, first it was just, it was empty, didn't have much going on. Now it's like, it was like cleaned within a hospital grade clean. And like,
Chinese whispers.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a couple of issues that I want to talk to you here about as well, and you know, because you might have experience in that. Now, I think this is a heavy topic as well, but I've wanted to talk about it for some time on my podcast, but I wanted the right guest to come on. So, and you're that guest. But child trafficking around the world. I don't know if you've seen a movie called Sound of Freedom. Practically a movie that unfortunately got labelled by the left media in America, like CNN and CNBC, as a right-wing conspiracy theory movie.
Crazy that they...
Hey guys, here's a clip from Fox News of what we're talking about.
Faith thriller Sound of Freedom has roared in the theaters.
Right, even knocking the fedora right off of Indiana Jones's July 4th box office rankings and taking the #1 spot that day.
How'd that make you feel? Giving a child his freedom.
Felt good.
You've been at this for 12 years. Why are you doing it?
Because God's children are not for sale. Joining us right now is the guy who the movie is based upon, Underground Railroad founder, Tim Ballard, who helped save kids from traffickers all around the world. Tim, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Because it's a real problem. People are waking up, and we think this could be a major solution in the fight against child trafficking.
Yeah, you know, Tim, it's a true story about you. You work for Homeland Security, and then you were arresting these pedophiles, and you realize, hey, there are victims out there, and I want to save these kids. And the true story is your wife said, you know, quit your job, and you go save this family. Brother and sister are kidnapped. They think they're going to be models, and a beautiful lady says to their dad, just leave them here in this room. I'll take care of them. Come back and pick them up later this afternoon. I'm going to teach them how to be models and give them a modeling career and make a lot of money for your family. He comes back, and the lights are off. The kids are gone. And so you make it your life mission to save the little boy, and you promise the little boy, I'm going to save your sister. Did you tell us the story of this? Because I understand it was a Fox movie, and then when Disney bought Fox Century 20, the 20th Century, then this was tabled. And so how did it get to the Angel? How did the Angel Network get involved?
Well, yeah, Fox, as you said, produced it. Disney bought it, and Disney was very clear that they weren't going to do anything with it. The irony there is pretty almost poetic now. The producers wrestled it away, and it went through several hands. And I actually was I was invited to the set of The Chosen, and I happened to be there, and I ran into the Angel Studios executives just sitting there in the fake Jerusalem set. So it's kind of cool. And I told them that this film is about to lose the people who had it, the rights were going to expire. They jumped in and grabbed it, and I mean, they made a deal in 5 days.
That's great.
With the producers, Eduardo, and then 90 days later, here we are. It happened really fast. Angel Studios, very creative. They know how to do this.
What did Jim Caviezel do to the part and playing you?
Well, when they asked me back in, I believe, 2018, who I would like to play me, right out of the gate, I said Jim Caviezel.
Awesome.
And they didn't like that because there's a cool scene at the end of the movie where they transition into actual footage from the operation that's depicted in the film. And they said, you look nothing like Jim. We want someone that looks a little bit like you. And I told them I don't trust Hollywood very much. I told them I think I'm in business largely because of Hollywood and the sex content they constantly create, which leads to the demand. And I said, Jim Caviezel loves Jesus. That's important to me because I love Jesus. And I think that, you know, that's the connection point where I feel comfortable. And they went with it, and I think they made the right decision. Anyone who sees the film, I think, would agree.
Yeah, indeed. But there's been some criticism in the mainstream media where they suggest there's some sort of a connection to your movie and QAnon. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I can't explain it, and neither can they. Every show I've seen, they just like to throw the word out, QAnon. They make zero connection to the actual story. it's very difficult to make that connection when it's actually based in a true story. Every kid is real in the story. Every bad guy is real. You know, they play with some timing and things like that to fit it all in. But where's the QAnon doctrine being spewed in the film and the script? I have no idea, because this is actually what it looks like, because this is what happened. I was there, and several others were there to confirm. So this is just some other agenda. You know, I mean, who would want to get the backs or run interference for pedophiles and human traffickers? That's the more important question in all this. Why would you want to lie to push an agenda whose goal is to have children be in captivity? It's kind of sick.
Tim, I think for our viewers that have, you know, faith in their life, I think they know that God is just blessing you because you're telling a story, and Disney doesn't want it told. And, you know, people don't want Jim Caviezel. You know, he's had a hard time getting booked for movies because he played Jesus in Passion of the Christ, and he's expressed his love for Jesus. So I'm so glad you're telling the story. It's awesome how God has made this all just happen and come to be. And I think you spent like $15 million, and you've made 3 times that now, which is awesome. My family's seen the movie. I saw the movie. It's hard to watch because as a mother, you think, if someone did this to my child, my goodness. So tell us about the problem and what as a country we can do to help this.
Well, this is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, and too often Americans sit back and say, this is something far, far away from us, and it's not. We are generally speaking, we are the demand for consuming child exploitation material. Often we're the #1 producers. We're in the top 3 countries for destination countries. We are the ones pushing these movements about sexualizing kids, calling it sex education. We're the ones who are allowing or wanting children as young as 13 years old to be able to consent to anything, including body mutilation, which will only lead to consent laws around children being able to consent to have sex with adults. You know, we are the country that allows, in the last 2 years, 85,000 unaccompanied minors to come to our border and then be let in without any vetting, no background check. And what do you think's happening in the economy of pedophilia? We are the problem. We are the demand. We are creating this.
Right, and they got phony sponsors. The sponsors drop them off in the fields, and they're basically working all day, no communication with their families. It's happening right now. Those kids coming across the border are not going to good situations. I want you to hear what CNN said about you. Listen to this and have you respond.
Films are created out of moral panics. They're created out of bogus statistics. They're created out of fear. And with something like Sound of Freedom, it specifically is looking at QAnon concepts of these child trafficking rings that are run by the high-level elites, and only people like Tim Ballard and only people like Jim Caviezel, and by extension, only people like the ticket buyer can help bring these trafficking rings down.
Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, as that guy's talking, and he's nobody's hero, by the way. I can't imagine any kid looking at him thinking he's going to help them out. But I think of the children that are really depicted in that film. I know what happened to them. Those children were the subjects of child rape videos. Those children were being sold for sex. In total, you see over 120 kids actually are rescued in the story that's being depicted, even if the movie doesn't get into all of them. These are real kids. I see them. I'm still friends with them. So it's embarrassing and frankly grotesque for this guy who knows nothing to start throwing out terms like QAnon and connecting it to a real story. I mean, they're not even thinking about it. So what are they thinking about?
Are they pro-sex trafficking?
Children?
It's so bizarre. It's like they're pro-sex trafficking. Like, leave the industry alone.
That's how it feels to me. It feels like there's some other agenda, because why do this?
There's that one scene in the movie where it's an older man and he's picking out what little boy or what little girl he wants to take into, you know, but I just can't even talk about it, but to take away. And we know what's going to happen to that child. Does that really happen, and how often does it happen?
Well, this is happening all the time. I mean, there are 6 million children, believe it or not, according to the Department of Labor, Department of State, who are stuck in slavery of one kind or another. Either it's sex, labor, or organ harvesting. I mean, organ harvesting, we've been taking down several organ harvesting rings where they take little babies and you know, use them that way. And so we see everything, you know, and the film depicts every kind, whether it's the lure, like you mentioned, that's a real person, that beauty queen who was recruiting kids as young as 9 years old and then grooming them to be sex slaves, or whether it's the more kind of, hey, we're going to you've been taken. We're going to select you for this or that. We see everything. It's all in existence, and there's millions of kids.
Well, everybody is talking about your movie. Congratulations. It's a tough topic, but it's important. Tim Ballard, sir, thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank
This
you,
is
guys.
from
Thank
the studio that brought us The Chosen, and go to angel.com/freedom if you want showtimes. Support this movie, support the cause, because people like Tim are going out and saving these children. And you're right, God's children are not for sale. Tim, thank you so much.
Which was really disappointing, because the reason they did that is because it went against the Democrat open border policy.
Yep.
Which to come out and try and suppress that issue, such an issue which is so serious, to try and suppress that issue is pretty cowardly, in my opinion. If you're a media outlet coming out and saying that, like if I was the person that was saying that, I would have quit my job and said, "I'm sorry, I'm not saying that."
It's insane that I would do that, like just to stop DNA testing on borders.
Yeah, so they're willing to cover up, those stories because they made the Democrat open border policy look like shit. But anyway, this movie was quite hard to see in Australia. The only reason I got to see it was I flew from Sydney to the UAE on an Emirates flight, and it was on that, so I watched it. But it's basically about a guy, a US agent, that basically brought down a cartel type operation where they are trafficking kids through Mexico into America. And they read out some pretty crazy stats at the end of that movie, where around 5 to 7.5 million kids per year are trafficked.
It's wild.
The number one destination where they're trafficked into, now I don't know how theoretically real this is, or the information backing up the movie, but it does say at the end that the number one destination they're trafficked back into was the United States of America, which again made the open border policy look like shit. And when Trump was in office, he had instant DNA testing for anyone crossing the border with a kid, so they could automatically know that if they were related.
Yep.
Now, the day that the Biden office came in, they took that DNA testing away.
Crazy.
So anyone can walk over with a kid and be fine. And no one's going to ask any questions of why is that kid with a male that they may not look anything alike.
Yeah, that's
now,
right.
which obviously can increase the likeliness of kids being trafficked across the border into America.
Yep.
Which I just find so inhumane to a level which actually angers me a little bit. But a lot of people don't realise that this happens all around the world, and they say that the child human trafficking trade is vastly becoming bigger than the drug trade.
Well, human trafficking is the biggest commodity trafficked on earth, or humans are the biggest commodity trafficked on earth at the moment.
Yeah, and we're still in a time where there's still slaves around the world as well.
It's crazy.
But a lot of people don't realise this.
Yeah,
because we live in the Western world of the bubble where it's just, kids don't get taken.
Yep.
But they do all around the world.
Most definitely, yeah.
All the time. And they're sold into slavery, they're sold into sex trafficking rings. And once they're done with them in this movie, it also says that, once a kid becomes used too many times, they'll generally cut it open and use it for parts and sell it for organ parts, which is absolutely crazy. But look, I know that you sort of understand that world as well, so I just want to get your sort of thoughts on it. I know we spoke off air before, so what you can say, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I guess in recent years I've been more exposed to it. Like I would watch that movie. I've watched that movie as well, and face value, I've always known it happens, right? But up until a few years ago, I probably didn't have a great handle on it. And I explored the idea of going into that field myself, but it was probably something for a multitude of reasons I won't get into here. Not something that I can do presently, but because of that, I know a fair few people now that are involved in that area.
Rescuing
these kids, and particularly in the sex trade industry. And it's much bigger than what I thought. It's much bigger. Even you read those stats on the thing, and it sort of doesn't resonate a heap with me. You just sort of your brain sort of goes, that can't be right. Like those amount of people can't be getting trafficked unnoticed. But then you speak to these guys and girls that are working in this area and liberating these kids, and like all across the globe in the craziest of places and with the craziest like stories of how they, like, you know, these people that are trafficking humans are dangerous and they're paranoid. So like you imagine the people that have to go in and try and figure this out and be successful at like getting these kids out. Like their stories are incredible, and it's just ongoing, and there's no money in it. Like there's barely any money in it for the
There's
people.
no money supporting it to stop it. Yeah.
Like I mean, you could say, oh, they had a couple of million donated to them last year, but like for the amount of people in it, it's just not enough. So like the guys and girls that are working it are probably getting paid, or they are getting paid stuff all for what they're doing. Actually getting paid stuff all, not for what they're doing, just stuff all in general. Like it's just the money's not there. The people aren't there. I think I said to you before, I think I read something about 5,000 to 8,000 police globally are designated to human trafficking. So we're talking millions of people, and there's only 5,000 to 8,000 police over the globe, like
that are working on stopping the industry.
Yeah, so they're like professional, full-time people. So it's such a small number, and you'd have to fact check that number, but it is within that realm. And then, so the only other answer is all these other groups, organizations that go and try and do it. And they're just relying on money from donations. So like if people don't believe that it's a problem, so you got a Democratic Party selling it that it's, or left-wing people selling it that it doesn't exist, not a problem, who's donating, right? It should be like, once you get down into the numbers of it and you hear some of the stories, and like these friends of mine are just constantly on the move. Like they're constantly working. It's not like, I can't describe how big it is. Like, and once you get down to it, like it should be like the globe's almost primary focus. Like it's much worse than anything else. Like that's going on. Like but still it'll get sold as like for a political gain, it'll get sold as like falsehoods or whatever. Like it's wild, mate.
Yeah, and that's what I found most disgusting about it, and that's when I really turned. Because because I was quite, and I've said this on a podcast before. I was quite middle to left leaning. You know, like I had that thought about the world, and when they came out and said that after I watched the movie and after I did the fact check, and the movie followed a guy, and that was a real story, and you read his bio, and he has all the evidence there. I read that, and then they said that, and I'm like, I'm done with this side. I can't support a side. I don't care what their other policies are. If they're going to come out and openly say that movie is a right-wing conspiracy theorist movie, then call me right-wing. Because that's the side I'm on. Because, and they have some like really confronting sayings in that movie, like you can only use a bag of cocaine once. But you can use a kid multiple times.
That's right, yeah.
So that's why the industry is becoming so much bigger than the drug industry, because one kid could use you for years, and then when he's done, when that kid is done, they kill him, open up their parts, and sell them.
Or they just, like a lot of them too, from what I've heard and observed, is that they just end up in the adult sex trade. So they just go from kids. Now they might not be working for the same master, but they are either working for another one, or they are, or they're just still like, they're so bent, like that's their only value that they see that they've got.
Well, that's all they've known as well.
That's right,
And they're probably addicted to drugs. That's the only way they can get jobs. That's the only way they can feed their addiction.
But, and also I think like with those...
And they've probably they've been forced to being addicted to drugs. That's what I'm trying to say as well.
Yeah, they're forced to be addicted to drugs.
Because they would have been hooked up to them early when they got in when they would have been taken.
Yeah, that's right.
To get into the initial trade, they would have been doped up and shit like that.
Yeah, particularly as they get older too, they need to be subdued more. It's a crazy, but like, then I think the grotesqueness of like just how bad it gets too, like people don't understand, like, they might have a picture in their head of a 10-year-old or something like that. Like it's babies as well. Like it's like 2-year-olds, like being like fully molested like rape by like full grown men, like and like being sold by their own dads and stuff like that. And I'm referencing a particular story, like a particular case that a friend of mine worked on. And this kid was just sold over and over and over, like from about a year to 2 years. He was at 2 years old when they liberated him, saved him, but over that year, like that's what he was sold for. Like it was just sex with men. Like but you know, if you've ever held a baby or had a kid, or you've got common sense, like you know that just doesn't work, right? Like so, it's real hectic stuff, and and you know, particularly even in the Philippines, there's like snuff stuff as well. Like it goes right from it's just incredible. Any type of worst nightmare scenario you can think of, it's everything in between as well. Like it's crazy. It is crazy that it's like being ignored.
Yeah, and that's my one concern, and that's that's why I wanted to bring it up with you as well, because you know, to the listeners out there, this sort of shit is happening, and it's hard to listen to.
Yeah,
a lot of people find it hard to listen to. I know that my wife, I try to get her to sit down and watch that movie. She's like, I can't watch it.
Oh yeah, same with mine.
Because it's just too confronting for him.
Yeah.
And people probably listening to this are also thinking, oh man, like you instantly start feeling sorry and sad, and you almost just want to delete it so you can go on with your life. But
100%.
The more people that are, you know, at least mentioning the story and talking about it, you know, like
I'm the same. Like I know about it, and like I know how, but like sometimes it just boggles the brain, right? Like, and then it's insane, like how bad it is, and you do have to delete it, but like from your mind. Otherwise, you know, if like you'd be starting shotguns or whatever. Like if you don't do something about it. But you know, I even talked to my wife recently. Like we're having a look at some of the charities that we donate to, and I'm just like, let's just consolidate it and give it to this one group that I know that people that work for them, because I know where my money's going. Yeah. And they need it. Like they need every cent they can get. Like,
I think as well, you know, like I generally think that everyone, even murderers, even drug dealers, they should get they should have a fair trial. But anyone involved in this industry, I just hope nothing but death for them.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think it was the Philippines that nearly brought back the death sentence for, ironically, an Australian pedophile over there. Like, it would have been in the last 8 years, I guess. He like committed some of the worst and like snuff films with kids and stuff like that. And like I just read the article on like detailed article on what he did. And mate, I think I had PTSD for about a year after that. I couldn't shut my eyes without just thinking, I just did not believe that something like that, like how bad he was, like what he did to these kids and how young they were, and what he did on film and and then people consume it like
that's
like they're saying that US is the biggest consumer of child pornography. Like that's insane. Like they're a big country, but like Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that is absolutely
for moral
insane.
Values, like for the beacon of light that we were just saying before. Like
they're
we're looking to you.
They're supposed to be the free speech.
Yeah, and you guys are degenerates.
Their morals are supposed to be right, but they're
big P Diddy party.
Yeah. Oh, bro, I feel so sorry for Justin Bieber. I reckon that kid has just.
He's seen some stuff.
Yeah, he's seen some stuff from those Diddy parties, but mate, like I hope it brings down the whole industry with that. Whoever was involved in it, I hope it brings them all down. And I've even heard stuff like Usher's deleted his whole history on Twitter. Pink's deleted her whole history on Twitter. Jay-Z and Beyonce are under investigation in New York. All this stuff that's none of the news is letting anyone know about it. But if you go on the right platforms, you can find out.
Yeah, it's wild. Like that. People are sort of, you know, someone said recently, I think, I can't remember who it was. They're just like, well, if you knew about it and didn't do anything, you're not a witness, you're an accomplice.
Yeah.
And like, they're all like, if you went to any of those parties and saw any of it, like, or suspected any of it and just didn't do anything about it, or were a repeat offender, like going back to them, like, and just like, oh yeah, this is cool. Like,
and also as well, like, when is not being a 100 millionaire enough?
Yeah, that's right.
Like enough to, you know, seduce people and make them drink till they black out and do stuff to them, or potentially have children in there where they're, you know, doing stuff to underages and stuff. Like, well, when is not being 100 millionaire enough? Like, what type of power have they got to be able to do that on a repeated level where they just keep doing that stuff, but they keep not getting in trouble for it.
It seemed widely known, didn't it?
Yeah, and like what did he have on the people or that were making the calls to get him in trouble?
Yeah, that's right.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, whoa, like who was done what there?
Yeah,
for him not to get in trouble.
It's
and it's
incredible. Well, money, it's just, like we are talking about before.
Power as well.
Governments and stuff like that, they're all backed by the same people on both sides.
Yeah.
Like, it's just money that just
Well,
gets worse and worse.
I hope everyone drowns in that. Everyone that deserves to go, I hope they all go down.
Same.
And if it goes as far as LeBron James saying that he loves his P. Diddy parties all the way through to Jay-Z and Beyonce, then fucking so be it.
Yeah, no, I agree, mate. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Well, mate, look, I'm going to start wrapping this thing up. I do have a question which I ask all my guests, which is a bit of a cornerstone of the podcast. So looking back to your 18-year-old self, if you could give yourself one bit of advice about life, what would it be?
Man, it's hard because I did read this question. I was like, and listen to it. I was just like, my 18-year-old self wouldn't have taken it.
Yeah.
So like, you can give like, it was just like, fuck, like, looking back on it now, I think, and it's a tough one for me because I sort of aspire to go special forces and things like that, where you need an all-in mentality. But it comes at a cost, like taking life a little bit too seriously. Like I think having money enough to look after, your little area, your family, whatever it is, and pay for doing things that you want to do is probably the advice I'd give my kids. So like, just don't, if you can get a job that you enjoy and that pays to do everything, but it's not just about like just going crazy and not like of the extreme and like the current generation where they're like, oh, work-life balance at 18 and why can't I buy a house? Everyone else bought a house. Like we work their asses off like to buy a house and do all that. If you want work-life balance, you got to sacrifice something, right?
Yeah.
And you have that now, like in your sort of, it sucks, but like from like 30 onwards, if you work hard enough, like you can start adjusting that, right? But it's probably not to take everything too seriously in terms of just you got to be happy over everything else and look after your family would be a big one. And also, throughout my life, people have sort of said that I've been lucky. I'm always like lucky. Oh, you've been lucky with this and stuff like that, lucky with that. And like, you play basketball, right? There's only so many times someone can take a shot and go, oh, it was a lucky shot, right? Like at some point they've just made the right decision or they've done the right thing. So they say luck is when hard work meets opportunity.
Yeah.
So I think having that in the back of your mind is luck isn't going to get you through. Luck's not always responsible for everything. Like it's hard work meets opportunity. And another good saying I heard the other day was the harder I work, the luckier I get. And I think, you just can't be lucky. You've got to if you want something, you've got to work for it. Like, and that's the end of it. So,
yeah, a lot of people see the end result, but they never see the they never see the absolute carnage you have to run over to get there.
Yeah, that's right. And like people will see that on like social media. I even get that on my Instagram. Like I don't have a large Instagram account, but it's just, it's got me doing counter poaching in Africa and other things that I've done, traveling around the world and doing like the military stuff. And they're like, oh, it's crazy. Like you're doing like, you're out hunting or you're doing this. And,
but look what I had to go through to get here to earn that right.
Yeah. And it doesn't, but like you don't show that on social media, right? Like they don't show hours bent over a keyboard, like going, this is shit.
That's
like
the boring stuff.
Yeah, if I posted me just sitting on a keyboard for all week before I go hunting, like no one would be like interested, right?
And that's the big problem about social media. Everyone 100%. Sees the end result and everyone thinks it's easy.
Yeah, and they and that's sort of what I mentioned about the generation now is that they're trying to get what's taken me like blood, sweat, and tears
30 years
through like wars and stuff like that. They want a house now. Like, man, the way I got like property was like I had to go to war to get enough money to put a deposit on a house. Like multiple trips. Like if I didn't go to war, I would still be struggling. I think to a degree.
Yeah. Well, my first and only Afghan trip, everything went to a deposit for a house.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I had to do. At the age of 21, I was home. I had my 20th birthday over in Afghan, and it was like,
Yeah, and everyone's just like, oh, well, I want his car and his house now, and like, mate, you can't start where I finished.
Yeah.
Like that's bullshit. like there is a backstory to this. Like
that's the power of social media.
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
you know, and how it's dragged these people into an end result, and no one working hard for it.
yeah. Well, that it you know, and I've struggled to see how they've got to this point where like they want to start where everyone's finishing, and it must be just like that social media thing, right? Where it's encroached, where they think it's real life. Like have gone, oh, I want that too, and they're like, why are all these people own these houses? Oh, they're driving up rent and stuff like that. Well, man, I've like worked real hard.
Yeah.
Like people like died to get to get me that house. Like it's hectic. There's a hectic backstory to this. Like there's not just me. Just oh yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I bought a sweet car or I bought a house or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those tidbits, they kind of like a bit contradictory in nature, but like that's what it is, right? It's hard work. It's also like trying to find that thing that makes you happy and not going too crazy. Yeah.
Well, good stuff, bro. That was a good podcast. I've just really enjoyed it. You know, like I did want to talk to you about a lot of the military stuff, but I also want to talk to you about the political affairs around the world, and in particular that the child trafficking stuff. So I definitely got out of you what I wanted to get out of here, and I hope everyone at home enjoyed, and I've got to head back to the Gold Coast now. So thanks for your time, mate, and until next time.
No worries. Thanks, mate.
Good on you.